Hello guys, it is me, Victoria, and today I wanted to talk about this book that I've read and couldn't really stop thinking about, and so I wanted to make a video about it because I thought it was pretty interesting. So basically, what I want to talk about is this is a book for teens about understanding their fertility, like their cycles and everything. So there's a chapter in it about when to decide like if you're ready for sex. And what I was really stunned by in this chapter was all the insidious slut shaming messages they managed to pack in there, even though it was supposed to be this like neutral, you know, give it to me straight kind of chapter about sex. So that just really was enlightening to me because I'm like, I always knew we got these like slut shaming messages from society, but it's like, where? It's almost like they're invisible. It's like, I know, like, I got this impression that like sex was bad and it was, bad to have casual sex and bad to be a slut, but it's like, where did I get that from? And, because like, yeah, and people have like commented stuff to me like, slut in all caps, but it's like, I knew it was coming earlier, and I'm like, did my parents give me that impression? Like, how exactly did they give me that impression? But when I read this book, I'm like, oh, right, it's stuff like this. It slips right under my radar, I'm sure at that young age, but because it seems to make a lot of sense. But knowing what I know now, I'm like, that's not accurate, and that's not a good message to send girls at all. So let me just read you some like main things from this chapter. So, here's a fundamental truth. Girls have a lot more to lose from sex than boys do. For starters, there's the obvious risk of unplanned pregnancy as well as contracting an STI that can lead to infertility, but those are just the physical consequences and don't even include, this is the part, the emotional pain that can come with sexual misjudgment. So the rest of this chapter just goes into great detail about this emotional pain that can come from sexual misjudgment. And I feel like the cause of this emotional pain is not that girls like inherently can't handle, sex for pleasure or casual sex. It's that people are always telling us that we should be ashamed if we have casual sex, and then of course we have it, and then we have like this emotional pain because like we didn't respect ourselves and stuff like that. And this chapter goes into so much detail about that. Like the most important thing is like it is so important who you choose to have sex with, and you have to make sure he completely respects you and loves you, like body, mind, and soul. And sex for just pure pleasure, like if that's even, something you would want, is like totally like disrespectful to you. And you need to like treasure and value your body. I'm like, am I reading some like speech at a promise ring ceremony in like Texas? Because this is what it sounds like. Yeah. So, another line from the chapter. The most important thing you can do for yourself is to develop an unwavering self-respect that will wisely guide you in deciding when and with whom to become sexually active. It's like, why, if you have sex with someone, does it mean that you don't have self-respect? Like, that literally makes no sense to me. Like, if a guy has sex with someone he doesn't find attractive or is mean to him, he doesn't think to himself, oh wow, I have no self-respect. He's just like, oh, I had sex and it felt good and like good for me. So why don't girls think this way? Well, because of books like this telling them they have no self-respect and they should feel ashamed of themselves and they need to save themselves, which is disgusting, for, someone when they're older, which is another line I just read in this book. It's like, here's another line from the book. One of the best things you can do to help you figure out if you are ready to have sex is to ask yourself why you want to do it. Out of curiosity? For the physical pleasure? Because everyone else is doing it? To express your love to your partner? It's like, okay, is that the correct answer? To express your love to your partner? And it's just like, why do you need to ask yourself why you're doing it? Like, why can't it just be because it's natural to want to do it? It's perhaps the most natural instinct we have in us to procreate and pass on our genetic material. Like, it's really just as natural as our desire to survive. But yet for girls, it's like this book is making them second guess it like 1,000 times. It's like, oh, is it just for physical pleasure? Like, that's somehow so beneath you? It's kind of disturbing. And there's all these, like, stories from girls that are supposed to provide, like, a balanced view of sex, but they're from girls who have these same sex-negative attitudes about how, you know, they had sex with a guy who didn't respect them, and then he, like, called them a slut, and they experienced extreme emotional pain, and then, like, finally they healed. I'm like, well, maybe instead of telling girls not to have sex, you should tell girls how to fight back against guys who use these misogynistic attitudes to shame them, like saying, you know, they're not allowed to follow their natural impulses while guys can. I mean, you should teach young girls how to recognize that manipulative trick and fight back. And let me just read you some other stuff from this. It's like, another question you want to ask yourself is how tolerant you are of double standards. As unfair as it is, your good reputation may be at stake. It's like, yeah, so why don't we just try to protect our reputation at all costs, rather than, like I said, educating people and fighting back? And, yeah. Basically, she says, it relates to the world I mentioned earlier that should always be at the center of every sexual decision, respect. I mean, I guess that could be interpreted two ways, but just from this chapter, it's all about, like, respecting yourself. And it's like, my main point is just, how are girls going to actually have self-respect for their own desires to have sex, to explore, to enjoy their sexual power and not feel ashamed of the sexual side of themselves, which is a huge part of any person, if we're constantly telling them that, you know, they need to think really, really carefully and choose really carefully. And basically the gist is try to minimize the amount of partners they have, and best is just find a long-term monogamous partnership where the guy is in love with you and respects you. And then how convenient for the guy, you can give him your gift of your virginity and he can feel as if he owns your sexuality because you have zero experience and he's had tons of experience, because guys are different and they can have sex with no emotional consequences, whereas girls just can't take the emotional shame of it. Yeah, because literally they're reading books like this telling them that it's you know, the most important decision they will ever make, when really, as long as you use protection and you never do anything that you don't want to do and use your judgment to make sure you're not having sex with, you know, people who will try to assault and abuse you, which can be difficult, but as long as you use your judgment, I mean, it can be something you do for fun, which gives you a lot of pleasure, is natural, and makes you feel great inside. And like I've said before in my videos, having casual sex actually made me feel so empowered and so much healthier psychologically than um, waiting for this like perfect person and having sex like once a year did. And one time I read this article and it was kind of like a pickup article for guys, and it said like guys have needs and one of the needs is sex. Well, there's like never in a history of women's articles been an article saying women have a need for sex. It's very disturbing how negative women's views about sex are and how they try to make young girls believe the same thing. So anyway, I rambled on a lot. What do you guys think? Bye.